Hello and welcome to a day in 15 minutes UPSC Prelims Daily Current Affairs by NeoIAS. Today is 18th December 2019 and the topics for discussion are postpartum bleeding or postpartum hemorrhage, BrahMos missile, National Institute of Nutrition, Global Refugee Forum, and finally Recycling of Ships Act. Now we'll come to the first topic of the day, which is postpartum bleeding or postpartum hemorrhage. Now understand this is in news because actually Kerala has managed to bring down its postpartum numbers, hemorrhage numbers drastically because back in 2013 it had developed and properly implemented the quality standards of obstetric care. Now, one of the key principles, this is one of the key principles under the WHO recommended strategy of active management of third stage of labor. Now we'll come and talk about a little bit about postpartum hemorrhage. Now postpartum hemorrhage or postpartum bleeding is actually defined as a blood loss of 500 milliliters or more within 24 hours for a woman after birth. Now postpartum hemorrhage is actually the leading cause of maternal mortality in low income countries, okay, and it is a primary cause for nearly 1/4 of all the maternal deaths globally. Now, most of the deaths resulting from postpartum hemorrhage actually occur during the first 24 hours after birth. And understand, majority of these deaths can actually be avoided by using special drugs which are actually prophylactic uterotonic drugs. Okay, these drugs are used during the third stage of labor and by the timely and appropriate management of these drugs. Now, you all will be knowing this. Oxytocin is typically one of these drugs which is actually given right after delivery of a baby to prevent postpartum hemorrhage. Now coming and talking about what actually causes postpartum hemorrhage, understand this can be caused because of the tearing of the cervix or the tissues within that vaginal region, tearing of a blood vessel within the uterus, bleeding into the hidden tissue area or space in the pelvis, and this mass of blood, that is what you call as hematoma. Bleeding in that region can also cause postpartum hemorrhage. The other reasons for this would be blood clotting disorders and placenta problems which actually developed during the later stages. Okay, so these are the reasons which actually cause postpartum hemorrhage. Now coming to the next topic of the day, which is BrahMos missile. Now there is a news because the land attack version of the BrahMos missile was test fired from a mobile autonomous launcher. Okay, and this was from the integrated test range at Chandipur. Coming and talking about the BrahMos missile, I hope all of you will know this is actually a medium range ramjet supersonic cruise missile. Okay, this is capable of being launched from submarines, ships, fighter jets or land. So all four dimensions it is possible to launch this supersonic cruise missile. Now this BrahMos is actually a joint venture between India and Russia, and the name BrahMos actually comes from two mighty rivers within these two countries. From India it is Brahmaputra and from Russia it is the river Moskova. Now this missile actually operates on the principle of fire and forget principle, and this has a carrying capacity of 300 kgs. Now the thing is, it can carry both conventional warheads, also nuclear warheads. The speed of this cruise missile is actually Mach 3, that is 3 times the speed of sound, and this missile has a maximum range of 290 kilometers. Now there is there's a plan to extend it even further to 450 kilometers and then further to increase it to 600 kilometers. This missile actually is a two-stage missile. The first one being a solid propelled engine, wherein the first stage would be a solid propelled engine. The second stage would be the ramjet liquid propelled engine. Now as far as this missile is concerned for India, this missile is operational within the Indian Army, Navy and the Air Force. So all the three forces actually have use of this missile. Now understand, India's recent accession to the MTCR, okay, has allowed Russia to provide the critical systems and technology to extend the range of this missile beyond 300 kilometers, because initially when we were not a part of MTCR, we had to limit the range of this weapon to 290 kilometers, but now since we have signed the MTCR, we can extend it beyond 300 kilometers. Now it has been successfully test fired from the Sukhoi 30 MKI fighter jets, and it makes the IAF the Indian Air Force, the first Air Force in the world to have successfully air launched a 2.8 Mach surface attack missile of this category anywhere in the world. So that is why this missile is very, very important from a military point of view. Coming to the next topic of the day, which is National Institute of Nutrition. Understand there's a news because it has been found that packaged food items has actually breached the safe limit of salt and fat content in them, and this was done by a study of Center of Science and Environment. Now, to talk a little bit more about this, a laboratory analysis by the Center for Science and Environment has actually found that an array of packed snacks and fast food has actually breached the limits of salt and fat content. And to calculate how unsafe these foods were, they actually relied upon the recommendations of recommended dietary allowances. Okay, now what RDA or recommended dietary allowance actually is? It is a daily ceiling on the amount of salt, fat, carbohydrates, and trans fat. So the RD is actually based on scientific consensus and has been agreed upon by a group of expert bodies such as the World Health Organization and the National Institute of Nutrition in India. Coming and talking specifically about the recommended dietary allowance, it says that ideally no more than 5 grams of salt, 60 grams of fat, 300 grams of carbohydrates and 2.2 grams of trans fat should be consumed by any adult every day. This is a main idea within recommended dietary allowance. Coming and talking about the National Institute of Nutrition. The National Institute of Nutrition is actually an Indian public health, nutrition and translational research center which is located in Hyderabad. Now this institute is actually one of the oldest research centers in India and is the largest center under the ICMR, that is Indian Council for Medical Research. Now this organization actually has many objectives. I'll just tell you a few of them. There is periodic assessment of nutrient intake by the population, establishment of dietary reference intake values by the population, identifying various nutrition deficiency disorders prevalent among the population of different age groups, conducting operational research for planning and implementation of the national nutrition program in the country. These are a few of the objectives under this organization. Now coming to the next topic, which is Global Refugee Forum. Now understand the first ever Global Refugee Forum is being held in Geneva, Switzerland, and it is being jointly hosted by United Nations Refugee Agency along with the government of Switzerland. Now this forum is the practical implementation of the 2018 Global Compact on Refugees. Now GRF will be convened at the ministerial level and participants will gather to address the current refugee situation in the world. It will be a high-level gathering of states and other stakeholders, which also includes United Nations member states, together in private businesses, non-profit and non-governmental organizations. All of these guys will be coming together and discussing about the refugee problem currently existing in this world. Now coming and talking about Global Compact on Refugees of 2018, understand it is a framework that represents political will and ambition of the international community as a whole for strengthened cooperation and solidarity with the refugees as well as the host country, the affected host country. The United Nations General Assembly affirmed the Global Compact on Refugees in New York in December of 2018, and the Global Compact on Refugees actually seeks to improve the world's response to the refugee situations by ensuring that refugees and nations hosting them receive the support that they need. Now, there are a few objectives under the Global Compact on Refugees. These are to share responsibilities more equitably, enhance refugee self-reliance, expand access to third country solutions, support conditions in countries of origin for safe, voluntary, dignified repatriation. So these are the main ideas under the Global Compact of Refugees. Now coming to the last and final topic of the day, which is recycling of ships. Now there is a news because the Recycling of Ships Bill 2019 has become an act finally. Okay, it became an act after it received the assent of the President on 13th December 2019. Coming and talking about this, the government has actually decided to bring this act to provide for the regulation of recycling of ships by setting certain international standards and laying down the statutory mechanism for enforcement of such standards. Now, accordingly, India has acceded to the Hong Kong International Convention for Safe and Environmentally Sound Recycling of Ships 2009. Coming and talking about this act, which is the Recycling of Ships Act 2019, the Recycling of Ships Act 2019 restricts and prohibits the use of installation of hazardous materials. Now for new ships, such restrictions or prohibition on use of hazardous material will be immediate, that is from the date of legislation comes into force, while existing ships shall have a period of 5 years of compliance. Restriction or prohibition on use of hazardous materials would not be applied to warships and non-commercial ships operated by the government. Now, ships to be recycled in India shall be required to obtain a ready for recycling certificate in accordance with the Hong Kong Convention. Now, the Act imposes a statutory duty on ship recyclers to ensure safe and environmentally sound removal and management of hazardous waste from the ships. Coming and talking about the significance of this, the accession to the Hong Kong Convention by India and the enactment of this particular act will raise the profile of our ship recycling industry and being an environment friendly and safety conscious, and would also go a long way in consolidating India's position as a market leader. So that's all for today. For more additional information for today's news, you can please log on to our current affairs website, which is www.neoiascap.com. So thank you and good night.
Like, share and subscribe to our channel for more videos. Follow our website neoiascap.com for the detailed content and monthly prelims digest. Also join our current affairs exclusive test series through the website. And finally, participate in the daily current affairs prelims infotainment quiz at our Telegram channel, that is Neo IAS Prelims, at 9:30 p.m. every day. Thank you.